Dia Shamlar, good evening. It's a distinct honor for me to be here in New Jersey with you all, with so many distinguished guests who spoke such beautiful words. I feel like I have a very difficult series of acts to follow, in fact, but public servants and the first responders who are here, please join me in welcoming them and thanking them for their service. Thank you very much to Adam and to the Turkish Cultural Center of New Jersey and Peace Islands Institute for the invitation to be here with you and for helping make arrangements for me to be here as well. I left Wisconsin, where I live, at 7 o'clock in the morning yesterday, and I got to my hotel room at 11:30 last night. It was a rough day of travel, including driving from the Philadelphia airport here amidst that weird thunderstorm last night. It was impressive if I could have actually paid attention to it. It's good to be here among many old friends and the opportunity to make new friends as well. And I will speak for the next 15 to 20 minutes or so, keeping you all from dinner. I apologize in advance on the theme, in service to humanity, values that unite us, which I think is a really important theme for us to be reflecting on in this season of war and polarization. So thank you for the opportunity to put my thoughts together on that theme. I'll start with a quote from Julian of Norwich, a 14th century English anchorite and theologian who lived through wars, the plague, and violence. She wrote, the way to fight evil isn't to cudgel the brain, or as I translate that for my undergraduate students. The way to fight evil isn't to bang your head against the wall. What Julian of Norwich said is the way to fight evil is to lead a life of love and laughter. I'll say, So I'll say a few words about love shortly, but first we'll try to laugh a little as I begin with 3 shamelessly bad knock-knock jokes. Okay? I'll need your help on these, so here goes. Knock, knock. Ach. Oh, bless you. I told you they were bad. All right, second one. Knock, knock. Tank. You're welcome. Okay, I know. You're hiding your eyes with good reason. I should be hiding my eyes in shame as well. Okay, last one. Knock, knock. Olive. Oh, I love you too. All right. And that's what's known as a transition. As we turn from laughter to love. Can we turn this down just a bit? Yeah, that's good. I am a preacher, so I can project as needed. Fethullah Gulen, in the most accessible of his 60 books or so, Toward a Global Civilization of Love and Tolerance, writes in the very first sentences that, quote, love is the most essential element of every being, and love is the most radiant light. Love is the greatest power, able to resist and overcome all else, end quote. Right? Yeah, let's act as if it were true. Now, that might sound utopian, but what I discovered in my research as I wrote his life story is that Mr. Gulen was actually a very practical man. He lived simply and he made pragmatic decisions consistent with his principles. He lived simply so that others may simply live. I'll take us through, for the next few minutes, 5 of the values he lived by that I believe can unite us. Those 5 also happen to be the topics of each of the 5 chapters in the biography I wrote, of which there will be copies available after the event. That will be gifts from the Turkish Cultural Center and Peace Islands Institute. Grateful for that. So, first value, Fethullah Gulen learned. And he taught those around him to value literacy and learning. It's well known that people inspired by Mr. Gulen have built schools all over the world, usually math and science academies, and I understand that now in New Jersey there are 17. That's amazing. And that's a lot more than the last time I counted. The philosophy undergirding each school can be communicated in a simple image that Gulen himself learned from Said Nursi, a mid-20th century Kurdish reformer. The image is simply that we must fly with two wings. That is, in our learning, hold together science and spirituality. As he put it repeatedly, there can be no conflict between science and religion because both are from God, one in God's work as creator, one in God's work as revealer. To learn in ways that will unite us, we must fly with two wings, uniting science and spirituality. Secondly, Mr. Gulen received among the Muslims he inspired the simple but revived among the Muslims he inspired the simple but profound nonviolent practices at the heart of Islam. It's a little known truth that nonviolence is at the heart of all of our traditions. Let me repeat that. It's a little known fact that nonviolence is at the heart of all of our religious traditions. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism. That is, people of faith presume that we can trust each other. And so we do things together. We gather in communities, congregations, assemblies. We pray. We fast. We break the fast in a feast like the one we will be celebrating shortly. We go on pilgrimage and we give to charitable causes. These are across our traditions. Our spiritual traditions, in other words, meet in being ways to train our brains for sociability. This is across our traditions. I'll even be so bold as to say, which I do in one of my books entitled Empire of Sacrifice, The Religious Origins of American Violence, that religions exist to end violence insofar as possible. Prayer, song, chanting, meditation, processing, circumambulating, fasting, feasting, these discourses and practices are designed to teach us how to live peaceably with each other. Mr. Gulen revived such practices in the 1960s and 70s in Turkey, especially among young people, in an era when Turkey was riddled with polarization and political violence. The value of nonviolence, these simple practices that bring us together, can unite and revive us again. Third, one of the features of Fethullah Gulen's life and teaching that most surprised me when I undertook the research now more than 15 years ago to lead to the book was that he often cried while preaching. In fact, he would sometimes sob uncontrollably, tears streaming down his face in the middle of a sermon. And in what was even a greater puzzle to me, I discovered that at times entire congregations would sob along with him. At first, my University of Chicago skepticism, that's where I was educated, kicked in. What's going on here? But as I began asking people about the crying Hoja, or crying teacher as he became known, people explained it to me in terms I came to understand. Ezra Koshar said, Gulen's tears were to awaken Muslims to collective suffering, and then to motivate them to do something about that suffering insofar as possible. As another one of the people inspired by Gulen's preaching put it, his tears were poetry without words. Practically, Gülen's tears and the tears of the congregations gathered around him, first in Turkey and eventually in 150 or so different countries, grew into the Hizmet community, the service community represented through groups like Peace Islands Institute and Turkish Cultural Center, our hosts for tonight, but also through the schools, through all kinds of businesses, and through dialogue events like this one to contribute to the common good and to civil society. I call that spirit of service engaged empathy. That is, if all Gülen did was get people to cry with him, wallowing in suffering, we would not be here right now. But just as the Buddha taught that the first noble truth is that life is suffering, he didn't stop there, and neither did Fethullah Gülen. Both taught people a way out of suffering. Esther Koshar again, who I mentioned earlier, a teacher and school administrator inspired by Mr. Gülen, helped me to understand this dynamic of service better. She said, quote, I was wondering why was he crying? Over the years, she worked it out. Quote, he was crying over the situation of Islam in the world. We're behind in every subject. As humans, we are failing God by not being servants of God. Look at ourselves. She paraphrased her takeaway from Gülen's tears. And rather than being angry, rather than blaming others, look at ourselves. Why are we here? The practical answer to that existential question was Hizmet, service. We are here to serve God and to serve our neighbors, even and perhaps especially to serve our enemies. Engaged empathy. Fourth, then, Fethullah Gülen promoted a value communicated by a single Turkish word that is very important to Hizmet, but often misunderstood. That word is hoşgörü. As some of you know, the term is a compound that translates literally to see nicely. The word usually gets translated as tolerance. But as many have pointed out before me, while tolerance is certainly preferable to violence, in fact, tolerance is a rather tepid virtue. Who wants merely to be tolerated, put up with, endured? And in fact, hoşgörü means something much more robust than tolerance. Dr. Scott Alexander of Chicago Theological Seminary, whose Turkish is a lot better than mine, suggested in the talk I heard him give in Accra, Ghana, that the term hoşgörü really needs to be interpreted within Hizmet theologically. Hoşgörü, Anderson suggests, most accurately means for Fethullah Gülen and people inspired by him that we must see another person as God sees them. See any other person as God sees them. And that means to see them first of all with eyes of mercy and compassion. Gülen put it like this in a talk at an event in 1995 in Istanbul, quote, our host for tonight, the Journalists and Writers Foundation, he began an agency that continues and with offices in New York City today, is known in Turkey mainly as a representative of hoşgörü. Whenever it is mentioned, immediately after that, hoşgörü is mentioned as well, end quote. But hoşgörü was not merely a brand for Fethullah Gülen, it was a bridge. Quote, there's no reason to fear one another, Gülen offered. All people can meet with whomever they want. To be sure, there were difficulties for the way of hoşgörü. There would be future tests, Gülen said, even enmity and real trials. Nevertheless, living by hoşgörü meant, quote, we must be as if handless to those who hit us, tongueless to those who curse us. If they try to fracture us into pieces, even 50 times, still we are going to remain unbroken and embrace everyone with love and compassion, and with love toward one another. We will walk toward tomorrow, end quote. Imagine how different this world would be if we learned and lived the value of hoşgörü. And people inspired by Mr. Gülen, finally, fifth, did learn to apply hoşgörü in very practical ways. The fifth value at the heart of Hizmet then is another Turkish word, this one, istişara, the Arabic is shorter. Here the translation is adequate, mutual consultation. The DNA of the Hizmet community is a mode of organizing that cooperatively develops agencies and corporations that are akin to what the Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus called social businesses or social enterprises. That is, recognizing the global problem of poverty, people inspired by Mr. Gülen sought to grow wealth, not to line the pockets of the few, but to solve social problems and to contribute to the common good. So they built schools, tutoring centers, daycare centers, a global relief agency, think tanks, television networks, a newspaper and magazines, an Islamic finance bank, hospitals, companies, construction companies, kebab shops, baklava bakeries, and on, all driven by a spirit of mutual consultation and a desire to contribute to the common good. When I began my research in 2010, things were flourishing. Hundreds of schools existed in Turkey alone. Bankasya was the largest Islamic finance bank in the country. Shifa hospitals were recognized as among the finest private hospitals in the nation. Zaman was the leading circulation newspaper, the newspaper of choice for Turkish air. I had jumped into the history of an extraordinary nonviolent social movement inspired by the teachings of a modest and self-effacing Muslim preacher. But in a series of steps between the years 2013 to 2015, the ruling regime in Turkey began to scapegoat Mr. Gülen and people of Hizmet for nearly every problem besetting Turkish society. Then on July 15, 2016, a failed or staged coup event led to an immediate government response that blamed Hizmet for that event too. And that led to the purge of thousands of people of Hizmet from every sector of Turkish society. All of the schools and businesses were closed by the government, with assets seized and eventually distributed via foundations to cronies of the leaders and family members of the government. Billions in dollars were stolen under the absurd accusation, the big lie, that Gülen and people of Hizmet, like the people gathered in this room tonight, were terrorists. That's what they said. People inspired by Fethullah Gülen were imprisoned, tortured, forced to flee the country, in political persecutions and human rights violations that are ongoing and continuing in Turkey and wherever the Turkish government can reach its long arms with graft and corruption. And yet, here we are tonight. Recall these words of Fethullah Gülen. Hoca Efendi, honored teacher, from 1995. Even if they try to fracture us into pieces 50 times, still we are going to remain unbroken and embrace everyone with love and compassion. Events like this Ramadan Friendship Dinner are happening all over the world. Last week, I spoke at one in Atlanta, Monday night. In fact, this week at the Carter Center. I have spoken previously at iftar dinners in Philadelphia regularly, Kansas City, Buffalo, St. Louis, Los Angeles, and at similar dialogue events in Kampala, Uganda, Accra, Ghana, Sydney and Melbourne, Berlin, Frankfurt, Vienna, Geneva, Tirana, Albania, Pristina, Kosovo, and 2 weeks ago in New Delhi, India, and Jakarta, Indonesia. The resilience of people of Hizmet and those inspired by Fethullah Gülen in the face of severe government oppression is a remarkable testament to the power of those values that can unite us, of learning, of nonviolent practices like prayer, of engaged empathy, of hoshguru, and mutual consultation. These values that unite us are deep sources of hope and deep paths to peace. And so I'll conclude my remarks and pave the way for dinner with the final paragraphs of the biography edited slightly to take into account the passing of Fethullah Gulen into the next world on October 20, 2024. Finding hope in the midst of trouble had been a regular, almost routine part of his biography, and by now there were islands of peace, as he called them, on every continent. Those peace islands were the schools, dialogue centers, and social enterprises wherever they operated. And those peace islands were countries where Muslims could celebrate their faith without oppression and where new friends could be made. For as Fethullah Gulen wrote in a poem written while in an exile that would last the remainder of his life, if an old man might be tempted during a cold winter in exile to despair of ever again seeing those green spring days, in fact, as he also wrote, eyes on a very long horizon and tied to no specific nation, these are now his words, our old world will experience an amazing springtime before its demise. This springtime will see the gap between rich and poor narrow. The world's riches will be distributed more justly according to work, capital, and needs. There will be no discrimination based on race, color, language, or worldview, and basic human rights and freedoms will be protected. Individuals will come to the fore, and learning how to realize their potential will ascend on the way to becoming the most elevated human on the wings of love, knowledge, and belief. Yes, this springtime will rise. It will be a time in which humanity will discover its real essence. Goodness and kindness, righteousness and virtue will form the basic essence of the world. No matter what happens, the world will come to this path sooner or later. Nobody can prevent this. Yes. Thank you. Amen. And then he adds, we pray and beg the infinitely compassionate one will not let our hopes and expectations come to nothing. End quote. In a winter of brutal strong men, such hopes for a glorious spring seemed utopian, no better than a prayer. Yet if there was one thing that Fethullah Gulen really knew how to do, it was to pray. So when he also encouraged people that, quote, difficulties increase in accordance with the greatness of the consequent reward, that too was a prayer. But it was also a maxim that had been tested in Fethullah Gulen's life and proven true almost from its beginning. To some, the oppression in Turkey signaled the death of Gulen's dream for a golden generation. And there was surely a death looming, now realized. The boy from Korajuk had died. And yet Fethullah Gulen's life was never about a short-term horizon to be measured by the brief span of 80 years and 10. He believed in heaven. He believed in resurrection. He believed in justice. These beliefs were not tied only to the next news cycle, the next election cycle, or even to an individual life cycle. His horizon was eternal. And so the end of Fethullah Gulen's earthly life would hardly be the end of his ment. Eternal truth cannot be contained by an authoritarian's ambitions. Fethullah Gulen had lived for a peace that surpassed understanding because it was a peace that surpassed the superficial limits of time and space. After all, even a Sufi in exile, whirled in a light far more substantial than mere earthly matter, caught up in an energy that was present at the very beginning of creation, and that would be there at the end of time. Thank you. Teşekkürler. Ramadan Mubarak and blessed Lent.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul, for your warm, sincere, and kind words.